Hello all, I wanted to make a quick video about how I make these wicking planters. They're based on the eave growing system, which is Mark Thomas Paine's concept. So it's really a Dutch bucket which is used in hydroponics, and what I'm using, rather than using a kind of soilless media, I'm using compost, which is eave growing system. But these are made from a 25 litre container, and you might see it a bit better like that. These hold car wash from a hand car wash, so it's a water soluble detergent, which is quite concentrated, and they just use that to mix with water just to make their car wash. Really makes a lot of foam, but what is quite good is, in a way, is that there's always a little tiny bit of residue in the bottom of these, and as you rinse it out you get a lot of foamy car wash, so you might as well use it to wash driveways down, clean cars. And then once there's no suds, just give it a nice rinse through, a bit of warm water. I use a pressure washer to clean these out, just to make sure there's no residues in there. I've got quite a lot of different bits and pieces. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see. But so what I've done, I've used a multi-cutter just to cut the top of the container off, and then that gives you this sort of 25 litre bucket. But one thing that's quite interesting is I've used a hole saw just to drill through, cut the top out of the bottle as well, the container, and this is it here. So that threads. It's a bit of a tight fit. So there you go, where's the camera? There's the top. So it's just been cut out from the top of the container. And then, I think it's about a 57mm hole. They might vary, but it's quite a tight fit, it just sort of threads through. And then, get it in. I've cut a piece of stainless steel rodent mesh. Indestructible. Rodents won't be able to gnaw through that. And then that makes like an aeration fitting. So this is just an example of what you could do on a larger scale. If you're making these out of a 55-gallon drum, obviously I've cut this as a bit of waste plastic, so I just wanted to show you. So then that allows air through to lower down in the soil. But on these ones, what I've done here, I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see on the camera, but this little piece here is the top of a 330ml water bottle. And I've used a pipe cutter. This is a ratcheting type. These are used to cut plastic water pipe, PE pipe. Just place it over the top of the bottle. That chops the top off. And I probably haven't got it now, no. I just wanted to show fitting. Sticks are out. So there's the top, and I've left the lower part of the cap on there, and there's a little collar as well, so the collar acts as a hold the thing into the bucket. But on these containers, because the wall thickness is quite thin, if you're using a larger container, something like this, it might be 3 or 4mm. But on this one, it's only about 1mm, 1 or 2. So what I've done is I've cut out some little plastic washers, and you could probably just use just a rubber washer even. Then that fits over the top of the cap. And then this little bit here is going to be hard to see. That's a little brass gauze, and this little 25mm pipe gauze that's made out of brass, so it's not going to rust away. So that fits onto the top of the bottle cap, and then the cap screws down. And the nice thing about that is it holds the gauze in, and it also threads that fitting, a little aeration fitting, into the side of the container, like so. And to drill those holes, some I used a steel metal punch, but what's probably easier and quicker is just use a cordless drill and I've got a step bit on there. If you haven't used one of these before, it's like a sort of conical thing, but right, it's got sort of steps, and each step is a different size. So it starts from 4mm, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 or whatever, goes up to about 35 or 34, that one. I think the whole size is about 27mm just for that fitting. So that's the aeration fitting. But then, because these are a wicking container, there's a compost at the top, planting leader at the top, and then down below there's a reservoir, and the reservoir has got an overflow, so when it reaches the overflow it just drains out. So if you're watering from the top, any nutrients that get washed out into the soil, which normally would get lost, you can actually sort of harvest that, so you can collect that into a container, or you can even have like a rainwater gutter, or a piece of maybe 50 or 75mm PVC. If you drill holes through it, you can locate these buckets over the top of that, so they line up with that, and then have a larger sump to collect that off, and then you can use that to water your plants and feed your plants at the same time, so you're not washing all the nutrients out of the compost. So what is good about these is, because they're a wicking container, you don't have to water that often, so you're not rinsing through all the soil, and yeah, you can actually collect any excess irrigation. If you water a pot plant, obviously a lot of that water just runs straight through. And the problem with growing in compost as well is, once compost gets, especially in smaller pots, once it dries out, it tends to shrink, and then as you water, the water just runs around the edge of the pot, and it just runs, it doesn't actually wet the compost. So sometimes what I do, smaller containers, actually get the whole container, stand it into a trough, sort of flood it, give it maybe 10 minutes for it to really soak in, then take it out. But every time you're doing that, you're wasting water. And if you're collecting rainwater to water with, which is always beneficial, because if you're using tap water, you've got to try and dechlorinate it somehow, so you've got to keep it standing for a couple of days, or run an air pump and oxygenate it, or use a kind of chlorine filter. If you're building up soil life, it seems a bit silly just to come along with lots of chlorine, which is basically bleach, and you're killing algae and things, but you're probably also killing beneficial bacteria and microbes as well. So that's my theory behind it. So drill the hole for the aeration fitting. That's about 17 centimetres from the bottom. I'm not sure about the size of these. There's a mould line on these, and I just measure up 50mm from that, mark the centre, and then drill a hole. So different grommets. These are sort of PVC grommet, but what I've found, and there's a sort of example here. So if you imagine, that's the container, that's the bit that sticks out, and this is a uniseal, and these are designed for sort of aquaponics, going into bottom of sort of koi ponds and things for filters and things like that. So they're high quality fitting, but they come with a sort of higher price as well. For this sort of application, it doesn't need to hold any pressure of water. So what I've found is these 25mm electrical PVC grommets. They take a little bit of wiggling to get them in, but then I'm using 21.5mm diameter, outside diameter I think it's UPVC, and that is overflow pipe. So that's the kind of thing that goes from your kind of expansion tank in your loft, or your cold water tank in your loft, and pops out the side of the house. So if your ball cock's not working properly, then it doesn't flood your house out, so that just drains out. These are solvent well elbows, and the good thing about these is these are quite a nice push fit on there, and because there's no mains pressure or anything like that, you can get away with just pushing them on. And the nice thing about that, if you change the idea of these buckets, or you want to reuse the fittings to something else, you can just take them off and just rearrange them, do what you like with them. On this one, I've actually solvent welded this on, so this sort of goes to show, once you solvent welded it on, that's good to go. There's no way that's going to come off. But this was a slightly different application. I was doing the same sort of similar kind of container, but rather than watering from the top into the reservoir, I had a I don't know what you call it really, like a float valve, and another tank filled up by a water butt with rainwater. So the rainwater would fill up the tank. Once it got to the level of the float valve, it would cut off, but then these are all set on the same level, so it'll fill up all the sumps in the bottom of the containers. Then I had a solenoid timer, so once the water level started to drop down, once it sort of dropped down, then the timer would cut off, so then after a set period of time, then it would refill the reservoirs again. So then you weren't God, lost me marbles. So you weren't constantly sitting in a puddle of water, because I think with these kind of things it's nice to have a little bit of an airspace, a bit of air gap.